Okay, this is Through the Lens, the perspective section. This is part 1. So in perspective, our essential questions are: what is perspective? What are the two types of perspective that we are addressing? What is visual perspective? And what are the types of visual perspective? So what perspective is, there's two branches of it that we're investigating. The first is visual, which is the way of creating the appearance of three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional image. And the second is social perspective, which is an attitude or point of view towards an object, idea, person, place, thing, or whatever. Tomorrow we'll talk about social perspective. Today we're focusing on visual. The image over here is force perspective, which is where you use proportion to create the illusion. It's a kind of a camera framing trick to make his hand look a giant picking up the Empire State Building. Okay, visual perspective, one-point perspective. There is a vanishing point on the horizon line, and all the other lines converge to that point. Your horizon line is the horizontal line that your eyes naturally rest at on a surface. And then the vanishing point is the point where everything goes to, and you just can't see it anymore. This is it in a drawing form, and this is a photograph of one-point perspective, where everything leads down to that little doorway. Two-point perspective, you have your vanishing point and your horizon line, and there's vanishing points at each end. So in this image, you have a building, and you can see that the city block recedes on both sides and creates two-point perspective. It's like the Flatiron Building in New York City. Three-point perspective is a little different. You have your vanishing points on the ends like you do with two-point, but then you also have a vertical vanishing point. It's either at the bottom or at the top, and so your buildings go up or down. Like here we see the Empire State Building and the two vanishing points on the side, and then the vertical vanishing point. Curvilinear perspective is a little tricky. You start with the circular frame and the diameter, the line across the middle. There's two vanishing points at the end, but it doesn't go straight. It curves, and then it has the implied curve behind it, so it's like a sphere. And then you have the vanishing point in the middle where everything converges from the side. You end up with a distorted image with curvilinear perspective. Fisheye lenses on cameras kind of do this, and you can see it in this image, where if you look at how the lines curve to the sides, that happens down here, but then everything also converges into the middle. It's like the optical illusion drawings that we did in Art 1. Foreshortening is the illusion that an object appears closer to the viewer. Even though it's a 2D surface, you can tell that this part of the image is close to you. It's created by angles and proportion. Like in the drawing of the boy that's pointing the finger, you can see that his hand and fist and finger are like right up there in your face. He's leaning forward too. His body is bent, so his head and shoulders are closer to you than his hips. On the right is a foreshortening photograph where the model himself is kind of contorted with his head bent down. So what you see is the sole of his foot and the palms of his hands, and then the rest of the body recedes behind that and is hidden. And he becomes kind of like an abstracted monster. That's a really cool illusion. Remember that. You might want to use something like that later. Atmospheric perspective It's the illusion of distance created by value and proportion of your fore, middle, and backgrounds. Things that are closer to you are larger and have more detail, and things that are back in the distance recede away. You can see that in this painting. The rocks are close to you. They have more detail. The middle ground, you still have multicolors, but then the background, it really starts fading out. This is a photograph by Ansel Adams, a famous American photographer who was a key part of us having national parks. And you can see this as well here. The river and everything recedes into the background. The mountains are there, but as they move away from you, they look like they change in value, they change in detail. Aerial perspective is also called bird's eye view. It's sometimes that term is also used for atmospheric perspective, so it can get a little confusing if you're Googling. But aerial perspective for our purposes is looking from above. So here's a drawing of a city looking from above. And here is a photograph of New York looking from above. And that brings us to your experiment. As above, so below. Now you can draw this or you can photograph it on a camera or a cell phone or whatever you want to do. The photography is a little easier, but if you feel like drawing, draw away. So your first thing you have to do is choose an interesting object. So it has to be something that looks different from above and below. All right? So you can't choose something like, I don't know, a plain tennis ball, because that kind of looks the same regardless if you're above it or below it. It could be a small object. This is the brass bell on my desk at school. Some of you might recognize it. It could be a large object like a table or a chair. What does it look like if you're looking down on it and then crawl underneath it and take a picture? So you're creating an image of looking down on it, like this one. And then also, what does it look like from below when you're looking up on it? If you feel extra creative and you don't have enough to do today, you could make your own object out of Legos. Just make it kind of jaggedy and then take pictures of that. And that would be kind of cool. And besides, Legos are super fun. Okay, that's it. Short PowerPoint. Yay!